Before Robin Hood had a bow, he had a spelling mistake, a name squeezed between two guilty lines of ink, written by a man who was not brave, not noble, not blessed by greenwood destiny, and not even especially good at lying, which was unfortunate, because by sunrise the Sheriff of Nottingham would be searching for the outlaw he had invented. The clerk's name was Osbert Pike, thin in the way men become thin when they eat after everyone else has eaten, shoulders shaped by apology, hair always damp around the temples, as though fear kept private weather there. His hands were careful, narrow things, more at home with goose quill and wax seal than knife, sword, cudgel, or anything else that required a man to stand too close to consequences. Osbert served in the records chamber of Nottingham Castle, where the air smelled of damp wool, old rushes, smoke, scraped parchment, and men pretending cruelty became law once it had been written small enough. He knew fines, tallies, rent, land disputes, and which villagers had been unlucky enough to live beside trees the king liked better than them. He knew forest law. He knew deer had more protection than hungry children, provided the deer belonged to the crown, which they generally did, because kings were marvellous at owning things they had never met. Osbert was not cruel, that was his comfort. Osbert was not brave, that was his problem. And on the morning Robin Hood was born, that problem came for him before dawn. The knock at his door was not loud, it did not need to be. 3 hard taps, low on the wood, tap, tap, tap. Osbert woke with his heart already running. A castle sergeant stood outside with rain on his helmet and no sympathy in his face. "Clerk Pike," he said, "the sheriff wants you." Osbert sat up too quickly and struck his knee on the bed frame. "Does he?" "Aye." "Now?" The sergeant looked at the unlit sky. "No, Pike, at harvest. Move." So Osbert moved. He pulled on hose with fingers that had forgotten how fingers worked, found one shoe, then the other underneath the stool, where shoes preferred to hide when history was breathing down a man's neck, and by the time he reached the lower yard of Nottingham Castle, the rain had thinned to a sour mist. Torchlight shivered against stone. Somewhere a horse stamped. Somewhere else a man coughed and spat. The castle stood black and high above the town, damp as old bone. At the outer gate, Osbert saw the gallows cart. Then he saw the rope. Then he saw the man beneath it. Will Atbrook was barefoot in the mud, wrists bound before him, shirt torn at the shoulder, a forester by trade or by hunger, which in those days could be much the same thing. He had the wide hands of a man who knew bark, ditch, hedge, and frost. One eye was swollen, his lip had split. He looked very much alive. That was the first offence. The Sheriff of Nottingham disliked disorder, noise, poor men who said no, and inconvenience before breakfast. He stood beneath a black cloak trimmed with dark fur, gloved hands folded over the silver head of his riding crop. His beard was neat, his boots clean, his eyes the sort that had never needed to ask the price of bread. "Pike," he said. Osbert bowed so quickly his spine clicked. "My Lord Sheriff." "You will witness." "My lord, if there is to be an execution, I believe, that is to say, according to the proper form, there ought perhaps to be—" "A priest?" said the sheriff. Osbert looked toward the empty road. "Well, yes, among other particulars." "The priest is late?" "Yes, my lord." "The royal justice is early?" Osbert's mouth closed. There it was, not shouted, not dressed in anger, just placed between them like a knife on a table. A royal justice was coming to Nottingham, a man with questions, a man with his own clerks, a man who might look at rolls, warrants, fines, seizures, and the little neat lies by which a shire was kept profitable. Will Atbrook raised his head. "I stole no deer." The sheriff did not turn. "No, you refused to name the man who did." "I knew no man." "Then your ignorance has done poorly for you." A sergeant shoved Will forward. His feet slid in the mud. Osbert stared at the rope. It was new hemp, pale where rain had not darkened it, practical and almost honest. A rope did what it was made to do. No flourish, no wax, no language. Will looked at Osbert then, not at the sheriff, at Osbert, and that was unkind of him. There are men who can watch a hanging if they keep their eyes on the law, the charge, the warrant, the official voice, the seal, the useful distance. But Will Atbrook had eyes like any other man, with fear in them, and anger too, and a question Osbert had no wish to answer. "You write it," Will said. Osbert's hands twitched. "What?" "You write what they do." The sheriff sighed. Proceed. The cart creaked, the rope went up, the priest did not come, and it was badly done. The knot sat wrong. Will kicked longer than he should have. The cartwheel stuck in mud when the sergeant pushed it away. So for a dreadful breath, the whole thing became effort. Shoulder, curse, shove, wood grinding, rope stretching, boots jerking over empty air. A crow lifted from the hanging tree and complained into the grey morning. Osbert's stomach tried to climb out through his throat. When it was over, the sheriff looked toward the road where the first pale line of dawn showed beyond the fields. Cut him down after terse, not before. One sergeant nodded. The sheriff turned to Osbert. Come. They walked back through the gate. Osbert's feet followed because feet are cowards too, most days. Behind him, the rope creaked once in the morning damp. In the records room, candles had already been lit. Shelves leaned under rolls and folded membranes. Tax tallies sat in bundles. Wax seals hung like dried drops of blood. A brazier smoked in the corner and did not warm the room so much as insult it. The sheriff removed his gloves. This matter will not appear as it occurred. My lord, the sheriff smiled faintly. Come, Pike. Do not make me dislike you before breakfast. Osbert opened the custody roll with hands gone cold. There was Will's name, Will Atbrook, forester, taken near Bestwood, charged with unlawful taking of venison and resisting officers. No trial, no judgment, no lawful end, just a line waiting to become whatever power needed it to become. The sheriff leaned over him. The man escaped custody. Osbert's quill hovered. My lord, several villagers know he was taken. Then they will be told he fled. They may ask where? Into the forest. They may ask under what name. The sheriff's face hardened. Osbert realized the error at once. He had made the problem larger by noticing its shape. My lord, I merely mean that if Will Atbrook is said to have fled, his wife may... His wife may what? Osbert heard the rain ticking at the shutter. He dipped the quill. The ink clung black to the nib. Will Atbrook. A living name. A name with a widow attached to it. A child. A cottage, perhaps. A cracked bowl. A pair of old shoes by a hearth. People who would ask questions and keep asking because grief has no respect for office hours. Osbert could not write it. This was not courage. Do not flatter him. He did not refuse the sheriff, throw down the quill, or cry murder beneath the castle roof. He simply panicked in another direction. His eyes jumped around the room. A hood hung from a peg beside the door, dripping rainwater on the stones. On the table lay a tax note concerning one Robert of somewhere or other, a man owing 3 pennies and a hen. From the courtyard below came a sergeant laughing. Rob him twice and call it lawful. Rob, Robert, Robin, Hood. A thief in a hood, a nothing name, a useful name, a name with no widow. Osbert scratched out Will's line. His hand shook. He wrote, Robin Hood. Then, because terror has never known when to stop, he added more. Escaped custody, suspected deer stealer, assaulted officers of the sheriff, fled northward toward Sherwood, armed, dangerous, likely aided by malcontents. He sat back, breathing hard. Sand scattered from his fingers too early and speckled the wet ink. The name blurred slightly at the tail of the H.N. Robin Hood. There he was, a man who had never been born, already wanted. The sheriff read the line. For a moment he said nothing, then his mouth curled. Robin Hood. Osbert's heart sank. The sheriff liked it. That was never good. It has a sound, said the sheriff. My lord? A common sound, sticky. Men will remember it. Osbert's tongue stuck to his teeth. Technically, my lord, it is only a clerical designation for purposes of... Make copies. Copies. For the market cross, church doors, toll road, alehouses. Let the villagers know this Robin Hood is hunted. Osbert looked down at the parchment. He had meant to bury a body. Instead, he had printed a ghost. By noon, Robin Hood had left Nottingham Castle. Not in boots, not with a bow, not over the wall in some grand leap, while guards cried out and horses reared. He left in ink. One notice nailed to a church door, one pasted crooked at an alehouse, one read aloud by a toll-keeper who could not pronounce malcontent, but enjoyed the shape of dangerous. At first people laughed. Robin Hood, said a butcher in the market, wiping his hands on his apron. Sounds like a lad who steals washing. Or hats, said a potter. Or wives, said someone else, and was struck by his own wife, which improved the general mood. At the church door, a boy read the notice aloud, stumbling over half the words and inventing the rest. Robin Hood! No, fool, said his sister. Robin. What's the difference? One's a name, one's a habit. By evening, Robin Hood had already been seen in 3 places. Osbert knew he had not been, because Osbert had been the only man present at Robin Hood's birth, and Osbert had not left the records room except to be quietly sick behind a rain barrel. A miller claimed Robin Hood had cut loose a seized sack of flour. A widow claimed he had frightened off a collector at her gate. A drunk at the Blue Ram swore Robin Hood had drunk beside him, paid for nothing, and vanished through the wall. This last report was considered doubtful, even by the drunk, but it made a better tale than saying he had misplaced his purse. By the next morning, a child had made a rhyme. Robin Hood, hood in green, runs where sheriff's never been. It was not a good rhyme. That did not matter. Most rhymes begin life badly and rely on children to drag them into shape. Osbert heard it from the castle steps and nearly dropped a stack of folded warrants. The sheriff heard it too. Useful, he said. My lord? Fear is useful. A named outlaw is better than a nameless irritation. We can hang men for helping him. Osbert's throat tightened. Helping him? Of course. Such men do not vanish without friends. You will prepare weekly reports. Reports? Sightings, crimes, associates, methods, why he has not yet been caught. Osbert's soul attempted to leave him by the ear. My lord, since Robin Hood has not, strictly speaking, been apprehended, it may be difficult to establish. Then establish creatively. The sheriff put on his gloves. And Pike? Yes, my lord? Do not disappoint me. There are many terrible things a powerful man may say. That is among the worst. Osbert began with little lies, small lies, manageable lies. Robin Hood seen near Papelwick. Robin Hood suspected of cutting snares. Robin Hood believed sheltered by unknown persons. Robin Hood moving under cover of rain. Rain was helpful. Rain explained almost anything. Footprints gone. Rain. Patrol delayed. Rain. Witness uncertain. Rain. England had built half its legal excuses out of weather and would continue to do so for centuries. But little lies, once fed, do not stay little. The sheriff wanted more, so Osbert gave him more. Robin Hood had crossed a flooded ditch. Robin Hood had struck a sergeant from behind. Robin Hood had taken a deer and vanished before dawn. Robin Hood had mocked the sheriff's men. That last one was dangerous, but the sheriff believed it at once, because vain men are always ready to believe they are being personally insulted by people who have never met them. Then came Alice at Brook. She arrived at the castle gate 3 days after the hanging, with mud on her hem and a child holding tight to her sleeve. She was not large. She was not loud. She had the look of a woman who had used up sleep and tears and found something harder underneath. Osbert saw her from the records room window and knew her before anyone spoke her name, Will's widow. Of course she had come. Grief, unlike law, does not wait for permission. The gate sergeant tried to send her away. She did not go. A clerk above tried to tell her petitions were heard on Thursdays. It was Tuesday. She did not go. At last, because persistence is frightening in the poor, they brought her inside. She stood in the records room before Osbert's desk while the child watched the candle flame. I seek my husband. Osbert's hands folded themselves. Name? She looked at him. He wished she had shouted. Shouting would have allowed him to become official. There were rules for shouting. There were tones, reprimands, guards, but Alice spoke plainly, and plain speech is troublesome because it leaves no curtain to hide behind. Will at Brook. Osbert looked down. Ah? I mean, yes, the matter is recorded. Then read it. Osbert wet his lips. Your husband was taken into custody on suspicion of forest offences and subsequently... Where is he? Subsequently escaped lawful custody. No. The word landed like a stone in a wooden bowl. Osbert looked up. I beg your pardon? No, mistress, the record states... I do not care what the record states. That was a shocking thing to say in the records room. Several rolls seemed to stiffen on their shelves. Alice stepped closer. My husband was taken by the sheriff's men. He was beaten in front of Tom Miller's boy. He was brought here. He did not escape. Will could not slip a knot if it were tied by a child. He once trapped his own thumb in a latch and waited for me to come home. Osbert's mouth opened. Nothing useful entered it. Alice placed both hands on the table. You write men dead and living as it suits them upstairs. So write me this. Where is my husband's body? The child looked from her to Osbert. Osbert's fingers went to the edge of the roll. Mistress Atbrooke, I am very sorry, but there are procedures, and in matters of custody the sheriff's office must— Lie better, she said. Osbert stopped. Alice's eyes were dry. That made it worse. Lie better, clerk, or tell truth. He had never hated himself more than in that moment, so naturally he chose the habit he knew best. The record indicates your husband fled with the outlaw known as Robin Hood. Alice stared at him. The candle guttered. Somewhere behind the wall, a door slammed. At last, she drew back. Robin Hood. Osbert heard the name differently in her mouth. Not comic, not accidental, not ink. Alice looked toward the child, then back at Osbert. Then I shall ask Robin Hood, since he knows where every lost thing goes. She left. Osbert sat very still. On the table, the custody roll lay open. Will Atbrooke had become a gap. Robin Hood had become an answer. That night, in a cottage with smoke-black rafters and little bread, Alice told a neighbour that Robin Hood had stolen back what the sheriff took. By morning, the story had reached the mill. By noon, Robin Hood had saved 2 sacks of grain, 3 hens, and 1 old woman's brass pot. By dusk, men were arguing over whether his hood was green or brown. Green won, not because anyone knew, but because songs prefer colour. 3 nights later, a tax cart was stopped on the forest road. No one died. That was the strange part. The driver was tied to an oak with his own belt, which he took personally, and the sheriff's coin chest was lifted clean away. Grain vouchers, seized from villagers behind on levies, were left in a neat stack on the road. Pinned to the cart shaft was a strip of green cloth. Beside it, a scrap of parchment copied in a rough hand from Osbert's own notice. Robin Hood. The sheriff's rage was magnificent. It filled the hall, struck the beams, frightened 2 dogs, and caused a page to spill ale down his own shoe. Mockery, he said. And no one corrected him. This was wise because it was mockery. Osbert stood with his wax tablet and stylus, attempting to look like a man who had not personally supplied the shire with its most convenient ghost. They used the name, said the sheriff. So it appears, my lord. They left grain papers. Yes, my lord. Why? Osbert almost said, because hunger reads notices too. He did not. He said, symbolic insolence, my lord. The sheriff turned to him. What? Symbolic insolence, Osbert repeated, regretting both words. A gesture intended to suggest that the outlaw sets himself against lawful collection. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. You will identify villages aiding him, every widow, every miller, every forester, every priest who smiles at the wrong time. Osbert wrote nothing. The sheriff leaned closer. You will make me a list. Osbert's stomach dropped. A name on parchment could be a death sentence. He knew that better than any man in the room. That night, Osbert sat alone in the records chamber while rain tapped the shutters and the castle settled around him like a beast going to sleep. Before him lay a fresh roll. At the top he had written, person suspected of aiding the outlaw called Robin Hood. Below that, blank space. So much blank space. The blank line had become worse than the body again. He tried to write Tom Miller and saw Tom Miller's boy watching Will dragged through mud. He tried to write Alice Atbrooke, and his hand stopped moving. He tried to write unknown villagers of Edwinstowe suspected. The quill trembled. Ink gathered fat at the nib, then fell. A black spot spread on the parchment. Oh, sweet saints, whispered Osbert. Sweet ink, sweet merciful desk, I have killed us all. He sat back shaking. Then he took another roll. A patrol order. Men were to search Alice's village at dawn. Osbert looked at it for a long time. Then he scraped the wax seal loose with a warmed knife, softened it over the candle, and changed the instruction. Not Alice's village. A flooded track 2 miles east. He added a note, credible sighting of Robin Hood near the old ford. He sanded the ink, pressed the seal, held his breath. There. Forgery, not the first, but the first that did not merely hide a corpse. The patrol went east. They found rain, mud, one angry goose, and no outlaw. Alice's village slept through dawn. Osbert told himself it was clerical adjustment. Then he adjusted again, and again. A sighting at a ruined charcoal pit pulled men away from a miller's barn. A report of green-clad strangers near a bridge delayed arrests after market day. A rumour that Robin Hood had been wounded sent the sheriff's riders into brambles so thick one horse returned without its rider, and with a smug expression horses should not be able to manage. Each lie bought someone time. Each lie made Robin Hood larger. He could cross flooded rivers, vanish in oak shadow, loose arrows in darkness, dress as a monk, a peddler, a charcoal burner, a priest, or, according to one very confident drunk, a handsome woman with a beard. Osbert had not written that last one. He wished he had. The trouble with legends is that after a while they no longer require their inventor, they find volunteers. Forest men began using the name, not merry men, not yet. They were thin, watchful, practical men with knives at their belts and hunger tucked under their ribs. Men who had lost pigs, strips of land, brothers, wives, patience. Men who did not laugh much, but knew the value of being laughed about by others. One ghost was harder to hang than 6 villagers, so they became the ghost. A sheriff's pouch vanished. A tax tally burned. A deer carcass appeared at the door of a house with 4 children and no father. On the church door, someone scratched beneath the wanted notice, God keep Robin Hood. Someone else added, and hurry him along. Then, one night, Alice came to the records room. Osbert did not know how she entered. Later, when he had time to be impressed, he considered 3 possibilities. She bribed a boy, threatened a guard, or walked in with such calm certainty that no man dared ask why. The third seemed most likely. He was bent over a patrol order, changing West Road to North Ditch, when her voice came from the shadows. You write left-handed when you lie for good. Osbert made a noise no dignified alphabet could hold. The quill leapt from his fingers. Alice stepped into candlelight. In her hand was a letter opener. It was a small blade. Small blades can still enter large cowards. Osbert rose too quickly, knocked his stool backward, and struck his hip on the table. Mistress Brooke, the records chamber is not open to general. Where is Will? The room went still. Osbert looked at the blade, then at her face. At last there was no clever path left. Clever paths had led him here. He was hanged, Osbert said. Alice did not move. Before dawn, without trial, the priest had not come. The sheriff ordered it because the royal justice was due. Will would not name another man for deer theft. I saw it. Her grip tightened on the letter opener. Osbert closed his eyes. Robin Hood was not with him. Robin Hood was not anywhere. I wrote the name. I invented him. I scratched out Will and wrote a lie. The letter opener rose. Osbert's knees weakened so badly he nearly sat without a chair. I know, he whispered. I know. Alice crossed the room in 3 steps and put the point beneath his chin. It was cold. That surprised him. He had imagined death would be hot. My husband has no grave, she said. No. My child asked when he comes home. Osbert could not answer. You let them hang him twice, once on rope, once on parchment. Yes. His voice broke on the word. That too was not courage. It was only the truth arriving late and out of breath. Alice looked at the patrol order beneath his hand. What is that? A change? For whom? For your village. She glanced down. Her eyes moved over the forged lines. You sent them away? Yes. Why? Osbert gave a small, wretched laugh. I am attempting to become less vile by increments. The blade stayed where it was. Do not jest. I am not sure I know how else to remain upright. For one long breath, Alice looked as though she might kill him anyway, and perhaps she should have. But then she lowered the letter opener. Not forgiveness, never that, use. What else can your ink do? She asked. Osbert blinked. My ink? You made a man, the sheriff fears. By accident. Then do something on purpose. The words struck him harder than the blade. Alice leaned close. Mayday. The sheriff means to hunt him. Osbert nodded slowly. He has discussed a public search, rewards, villagers forced to attend, a spectacle. Good. Good. He wants Robin Hood, said Alice. Then give him Robin Hood. Osbert stared. I must stress in a strictly practical sense that Robin Hood remains unavailable on account of not existing. Alice's mouth barely moved. Then make him exist where we need him. May Day came bright and damp, which was England's preferred compromise with spring. The sheriff rode from Nottingham in a cloak of dark red, with armed men at his back, and half the shire dragged along to witness triumph. Villagers stood in mud and wool, blinking in the light. Children craned their necks. Dogs nosed beneath carts. Crows watched from the trees, interested in government. Notices had gone out. Robin Hood had been seen in Sherwood. Robin Hood would be taken. Robin Hood would be dragged from the greenwood and shown for what he was, a thief, a rebel, a fool. Osbert walked beside the sheriff's horse, carrying the master roll, which seemed indecently heavy for parchment. His collar scratched. His thumb was stained black. Beneath his tunic, sweat ran cold down his ribs. The sheriff looked down at him. You are pale, Pike. I have an indoor complexion, my lord. You will soon have air. An alarming quantity of it, I fear. The sheriff smiled. You fear often? Yes, my lord. It has kept me alive with mixed results. They entered Sherwood. The forest did not glow. It did not sing. It was oak, mud, thorn, wet leaf, deer path, crow call, old track, and green shadow. But law thin there, you could feel it. The sheriff's voice did not carry as well between the trunks. His horse disliked the roots. His men had to duck under branches like ordinary men, which irritated them. First they found a green hood hanging from a low bough. The sheriff snatched it down. Child's trick. Then an arrow struck a tree 20 paces away. No head on it, just a blunt shaft and a strip of parchment tied around it. Osbert knew the handwriting. A child's rhyme. Rob in hood, hood in green, look behind where you have been. Men turned. Another hood hung behind them. Someone laughed. The sheriff spun. Silence! The silence that followed was not obedient. It was full of teeth. They pushed deeper. Voices moved between trees. This way. No, that way. Robin passed here. Robin passed there. A sergeant slipped in mud and sat down with such violence that even his sword looked embarrassed. A horse bolted at a carved face in an oak. Another arrow landed at the sheriff's feet. On it was tied a tally stick, one of the sheriff's own, stolen from a tax chest. Now the villagers were muttering, not loudly, not yet, but enough. The sheriff's face reddened. Forward. At last they reached a clearing. There was no outlaw in it, no archer in green, no laughing hero with a feathered cap and perfect teeth. At the centre of the clearing hung a rope, old hemp, darkened by rain, preserved, knotted badly. Osbert stopped breathing. Alice stood beneath it. Beside her were 3 forest men, a miller, 2 women from the village, and a boy holding a folded roll. Will's child. The sheriff's horse shifted. What is this? Alice pointed to the rope. My husband's last record. The sheriff's voice softened. That was how danger put on velvet. Woman, you are far from sense. The boy stepped forward and held up the roll. Osbert recognized it, the altered custody record, his own work. Will scratched out, Robin Hood written in. The sheriff looked at Osbert. In that moment, Osbert understood many things at once. He understood that Alice had taken the record from his chest. He understood that she had never trusted him, which proved she was sensible. He understood that every forged sighting, every false trail, every clever little adjustment had led him to the exact place where cleverness ended. The sheriff dismounted. Pike. Osbert's name cracked across the clearing. Every eye turned. Villagers, soldiers, forest men, Alice, the child, the trees too, if trees were feeling nosy, and Sherwood gave the strong impression that it was. The sheriff held out his hand. Explain. Osbert stepped forward. His legs did not approve. My lord, the document in question appears to be an earlier custody membrane, possibly retained in error, and any apparent inconsistency may be the product of transitional correction between provisional and final. No, said Alice. Osbert stopped. She did not look angry now, only tired. That was worse. Speak plain, she said. Osbert looked at the sheriff. The sheriff's face said, survive. It was an old language. Osbert knew it well. Blame Alice. Blame the forest men. Say the record was stolen, altered, planted. Say Robin Hood killed Will. Say anything. Ink is easier than courage. His hands shook so hard the roll rattled. The sheriff heard it and smiled. There is your outlaw, he said to the crowd. A widow's grief, a forged scrap, and a trembling clerk. This is what rebellion makes of fools. Some soldiers laughed. The villagers did not. Osbert looked at the rope. Bad knot. Pale hemp darkened by rain. Will's eyes in the dawn. You write what they do. Osbert took a breath. It failed. He took another. That one stayed. Will Atbrook was hanged before dawn, he said. The clearing went quiet. The sheriff's smile disappeared. Osbert's voice shook, but it moved. He was hanged without trial, without sentence. Before the priest arrived, the sheriff ordered it because a royal justice was coming, and Will would not falsely accuse another man. Liar, said the sheriff. Yes, said Osbert. That stopped him. Osbert turned so the crowd could see him. Yes, I am a liar. I am a coward too, and a poor servant of the truth, and I have hidden behind more parchment than most men use in a lifetime. His mouth was dry. His knees trembled. He continued anyway. I scratched Will's name from the record. I wrote another in its place, Robin Hood. There was no such man. Not then. I made him because I feared my Lord Sheriff more than I feared God, or shame, or a widow's face at my table. The sheriff took a step toward him. Seize him? No one moved at first. That was small. That was everything. Osbert raised the forged roll. I wrote a false outlaw to hide a true murder, and then the name ran farther than my hand could reach. Men spoke it, children sang it, the hungry borrowed it, the frightened stood under it, and you feared it, my lord. The sheriff's jaw tightened. You worm? Yes, said Osbert. That also. A murmur moved through the villagers. Robin Hood, soft at first, like rain starting in leaves. Robin Hood. The sheriff turned. Silence. Robin Hood, a woman said it. Then a boy. Then a miller with flour still in the cracks of his hands. Robin Hood, Robin Hood, Robin Hood. The name no longer belonged to Osbert. It no longer belonged to the sheriff. It had left the page. It had grown legs, boots, arrows, jokes, hunger, rage, mercy, and a soul of its own. The sheriff drew his sword. That was when arrows appeared from the trees, not in men, beside them, at boots, at saddle straps, at the sheriff's cloak, pinning one red fold to an oak behind him. A warning, not murder. Not yet. The sheriff froze. From the greenwood came no grand hero. No single man stepped out to claim the name. Only shadows, hoods, bowstrings, breath. The sheriff looked suddenly smaller among the trees. That was the thing about Sherwood. It had a way of reducing men who required stone walls to seem large. Alice took the rope down herself. No one stopped her. The sheriff retreated because he was not defeated, not fully. Men like him rarely fall in one clean blow. He still had office, allies, seals, prisons, and rooms where truth could be delayed until it starved. But he had been wounded in public, and public wounds are troublesome. They fester into inquiry. They attract royal ears. They become songs. Osbert could not return to Nottingham Castle. This was understood by everyone, especially Osbert, who had grown fond of continued breathing. At dusk, on the edge of Sherwood, Alice came to him. He was sitting on a fallen log with his head in his hands, trying not to be sick and failing in spirit if not in fact. She held out a hood, old wool, brown-green, weathered, Will's. Osbert stared at it. I cannot take that. No, she said. You cannot, but you will. His fingers closed around the cloth. It was rough, real, far heavier than parchment. I am sorry, he said. Alice looked into the trees. You should be. There was no softness in it. He nodded. I am. She turned to go, then stopped. You made a name. Osbert looked up. Alice's face was unreadable in the fading light. Now try not to shame it. Then she left him with the hood in his lap and the forest breathing at his back. That night, Osbert Pike walked into Sherwood with men who had been borrowing a ghost. He did not become Robin Hood, not cleanly, not in the way songs prefer. He did not wake the next morning taller, stronger, handsome, and marvellous with a bow. The first time he tried to loose an arrow, it travelled 6 feet, struck a bush, and frightened a rabbit into a better life elsewhere. The forest men laughed until one of them coughed. Osbert did not mind as much as he expected. Laughter, he was learning, did not always belong to enemies. Weeks passed, then months. The sheriff's men searched. Reports appeared and contradicted one another. Robin Hood was tall. Robin Hood was short. Robin Hood was a nobleman ruined by injustice. Robin Hood was a yeoman. Robin Hood was 6 men. Robin Hood was 1 woman. Robin Hood had once beaten a knight with a quarterstaff, a bishop with his own purse, and a tax collector with such elegance that the tax collector apologized to himself. Osbert heard most of these tales in alehouses, corners, barns, and once from a priest who should have known better and plainly did. The songs improved. That was the dangerous part. A bad notice may command fear. A good song recruits memory. One wet evening, in an alehouse where the rafters were black with smoke and the stew was thin enough to show a man his regrets, a singer stood on a bench and gave the room its newest version. Robin Hood was taller now, better with a bow, funnier, braver. He stole from the rich. He fed the poor. He made sheriffs sweat through their velvet. The room roared. Osbert sat in a dark corner with Will's hood low over his brow and his bowl untouched before him. The song was wrong in almost every detail. There had been no noble birth, no greenwood prophecy, no perfect arrow at dawn. There had been a frightened clerk, a dead forester, an illegal rope, a widow who would not bow, and a lie written because ink was easier than courage. Yet the song was truer than the record ever had been. Because power had trusted parchment more than people. Because a false name entered hungry mouths. Because the poor took a coward's forgery and filled it with their own anger, jokes, grief, and hope. Because a man who did not exist had frightened men who very much did, and because Osbert Pike, who had written a brave man by accident, now had to chase after him. Outside, Sherwood moved in the dark. Inside, the singer struck the table and the alehouse joined him. Robin Hood, Robin Hood, Robin Hood. The name rose into the rafters, slipped through the smoke, climbed the chimney, and went out across England, looking for somewhere else to become true.